No one noticed the shy alien princess until a human took her hand on the remote mining planet of Varian 5. Life was harsh and unforgiving. Rocky terrain stretched as far as the eye could see, punctuated by deep canyons and jagged cliffs. Harsh winds carried fine dust that clung to every surface, and the occasional tremor reminded everyone that the planet itself was unpredictable. Most humans who lived there did so because they had no choice. Mining corporations controlled nearly everything, and life was a constant struggle between survival and exhaustion. Goran, however, was different. Towering above most humans, with broad shoulders and strong arms honed from years of work, he moved with a quiet confidence. Miners whispered about him in the canteen, saying he could lift equipment that 3 men together struggled with, yet he never boasted. He did not need to. Goran's strength was evident, but what made him stand out more was his calm mind and his tendency to help anyone in need. His reputation for fairness and bravery had grown over the years, though he often downplayed it, preferring solitude and focus on his work. That morning, the air felt colder than usual, carrying an unfamiliar smell, a mixture of ozone and something sweet. Goran was repairing a transport vehicle on the edge of the cliffside settlement when he heard tiny, rapid chirps. He paused, wiping the grease from his hands, and looked around. Most miners would have ignored the sounds, assuming them to be some small wildlife or interference from the wind. But Goran's years on Varian 5 had taught him to listen. Something was different. The chirps had urgency, almost like a call for help. At first, Goran saw nothing, until movement caught his eye near the pile of crushed rocks. 2 tiny figures, no taller than a human hand, scurried toward him. Their skin shimmered in subtle shades of blue and green, reflecting the dim sunlight in a way that made them seem almost magical. The twins, a boy and a girl, were clearly frightened. Their large, expressive eyes darted around nervously, and their tiny hands reached toward Goran as if pleading. Goran knelt slowly, careful not to scare them further. "Hey," he said gently, "it's okay, you're safe here, what's wrong?" The twins chirped in response, their voices high-pitched and melodic. Goran had spent months learning to understand these sounds. The Lyrians, as their species was called, communicated not just through sound, but also through subtle color changes in their skin. The twins' tones were frantic, and their colors shifted rapidly from soft blues to sharp purples. "Village danger," Goran interpreted aloud, pointing to their gestures. The twins chirped again, nodding vigorously. Goran could sense the urgency. Something had happened to their home. Their tiny bodies trembled, but they were determined. He could see it in their eyes. They needed him. The miners passing by barely noticed the scene. Most humans ignored the tiny aliens, seeing them as nothing more than pests. But Goran's instincts were different. He had learned that intelligence and courage were not measured by size. These little creatures, though small, were asking for help, and Goran felt a deep pull to answer. "All right," Goran said, standing slowly. "Show me where we need to go." The twins chirped excitedly, hopping onto Goran's massive shoulder with surprising agility. He could feel their tiny hands gripping his shirt, holding on for balance. He smiled slightly. Even for someone used to heavy lifting and dangerous terrain, carrying 2 Lyrians would be unusual, but he didn't mind. He felt honored. As they made their way through the rocky paths, the twins guided him with chirps and gestures, pointing out safe routes and warning of dangers. Goran marveled at their knowledge. Despite their size, they knew the land intimately, and their instincts were sharper than most humans he had encountered. They navigated narrow ledges and hidden tunnels, avoiding crevices where predators might lurk. The journey was not easy. The canyon winds whipped against Goran's face, and loose rocks threatened to topple from above. He moved carefully, using his height and strength to shield the twins. When a sudden tremor shook the cliffside, Goran caught them instinctively, keeping them from falling. He was careful not to alarm them. Their trust in him was fragile, and he could not afford to lose it. Along the way, Goran learned more about the twins' village. The Lyrians had lived in the cliffs for generations, their homes built from a combination of natural rock and energy-infused crystals. These crystals provided light, warmth, and energy, but they were delicate and could be easily damaged. The twins explained through chirps and color signals that the village's main energy core had been sabotaged. Without it, the village would not survive long, especially with the predators and harsh weather threatening them. Goran frowned. Sabotage was serious. This was no accident. His mind raced as he considered who could do such a thing. The mining corporations had been expanding aggressively, and he knew they would stop at nothing to control resources. Perhaps this was a message, a warning, or an act of theft. Whatever the reason, Goran knew he had to act fast. As they approached the edge of the cliff where the village clung precariously, Goran's eyes widened. The twins' home was a marvel. Tiny structures glowed with soft light, suspended in ways that seemed impossible. Crystals jutted from the cliffs, forming bridges and platforms, but there was damage. Sections of the energy core were sparking, and some bridges had collapsed, leaving dangerous gaps. A faint smoke rose from the far side of the village. The twins chirped urgently, pointing toward a section of the core. Goran understood immediately. The sabotage had destabilized it. One wrong move and the village could be destroyed. Goran took a deep breath. He knew the task ahead would be difficult. The repairs required precision, and any mistake could be catastrophic. But he also knew something else. Size and strength alone would not be enough. He would need intelligence, strategy, and cooperation with the twins. They were the experts in their home, and he respected that. Together, they began assessing the damage. The twins guided him to the most critical areas, pointing out weak points and suggesting solutions. Goran listened carefully, asking questions and testing ideas. The villagers watched from their tiny homes, curious and cautious. Humans were rare visitors, and a giant one at that, helping their smallest members, was astonishing. Hours passed as they worked. Goran moved heavy pieces with care, ensuring not to crush delicate structures. The twins scurried along the edges, adjusting components, communicating in chirps and color signals that Goran had come to understand. Step by step, they stabilized sections of the core. Sparks flew, smoke hissed, and the wind carried dust into the air, but the team pressed on. During a break, Goran sat on a flat ledge, the twins resting on his shoulder. He looked at the tiny creatures, exhausted yet determined. "You're braver than most humans I've met," he said quietly. The twins chirped softly, their colors calming. It was as if they understood the compliment. As night fell, the canyon transformed. The stars shone brightly in the alien sky, reflected in the glowing crystals of the village. The wind softened, and a quiet stillness settled over the cliffside. Goran used the moment to rest and plan. He knew that the final repair would be the hardest. The sabotage mechanism was complex and dangerous, and he had no margin for error. Yet, despite the danger, Goran felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. These tiny beings had trusted him with their lives and their home. Their faith in him was humbling. He realized that true strength was not just physical, but also the courage to act when others could not, the wisdom to make the right choices, and the compassion to care for those smaller and weaker than oneself. As the first light of dawn broke over the cliffs, Goran rose. The twins chirped energetically, ready to continue. He smiled and adjusted his grip, carrying them carefully toward the energy core. Today, he thought, they would face the sabotage head-on. Together, human and tiny aliens, they would prove that even the smallest beings, with the help of those who care, could overcome the greatest threats. And so, the journey of the giant human and the tiny alien twins had truly begun. What no one expected, not even Goran himself, was that this mission would not just save a village. It would change the way humans and Lyrians saw each other forever. The galaxy was watching, though unaware, and history was quietly in the making. The morning sun cast long shadows over the jagged cliffs of Varian 5, illuminating the village with soft, shimmering light. The tiny alien twins perched on Goran's broad shoulders, their small hands gripping his shirt tightly. They chirped excitedly, urging him onward. Goran listened carefully, adjusting his steps to the rocky terrain. Each step was deliberate. One wrong move could send him and the twins tumbling into the deep canyon below. The village was alive with the soft hum of energy crystals, though the core still flickered dangerously. Goran's eyes scanned the area, noticing that some pathways between the tiny homes had collapsed entirely. The twins darted ahead, chirping warnings about weak sections and loose rocks. Their small size allowed them to move in spaces that would have been impossible for Goran, and he relied on their guidance to navigate safely. "Slow down here," one twin chirped, pointing to a narrow bridge made of crystal and rock. Its surface shimmered faintly, but cracks ran through it. Goran lowered himself, using his hands to stabilize the bridge while the twins moved ahead. They adjusted loose panels and added small supports with materials they carried in tiny pouches. Despite their size, they worked with precision and skill. Goran marveled at their ingenuity. He had faced danger countless times in the mining colonies, rock slides, storms, and mechanical failures, but nothing had prepared him for this. The twins were not just clever, they were fearless. Their trust in him gave him confidence, and he knew he could not let them down. As they neared the heart of the village, the cause of the sabotage became clear. A section of the energy core had been tampered with deliberately. Wires had been cut, and tiny devices had been planted that threatened to overload the system. The twins chirped frantically, signaling which parts were most dangerous. Goran knelt carefully, examining the sabotage. The complexity of the setup impressed him. Whoever had done this had knowledge of the Lyrians' technology, and the intent was clearly to destroy the village. Goran took a deep breath. "All right," he said, speaking aloud though the twins might not fully understand the words. "We need a plan. We do this carefully, or everyone here could be in real trouble." The twins chirped in agreement, their skin color shifting to a calm green. They understood him well enough. He was their protector and now their strategist. The plan required both strength and precision. Goran could handle the heavy components, lifting and securing them in place, but the twins had the knowledge to disarm the delicate sabotage mechanisms. Goran's hands were large and strong, not suited for tiny adjustments, so the twins scurried along, guiding him, placing tiny stabilizers and signaling when a section was safe. Step by step, they began restoring the core. The process was slow. Sparks flew from the damaged sections, and the hum of the energy crystals fluctuated dangerously. Every so often, a tremor shook the cliffside, sending rocks sliding. Goran used his body to shield the twins, catching debris before it could harm them. He moved with care, aware of the delicate balance between the human-sized repair and the tiny structures around him. During a brief pause, Goran glanced at the twins. Their tiny faces were serious, eyes wide with determination. "You're amazing," he said softly. "I don't know what I would do without you." The twins chirped softly in response, their skin glowing a gentle blue. It was a form of communication, a way of showing gratitude. Even in this dangerous situation, there was trust and understanding between them. Hours passed as the repairs continued. The twins' guidance was crucial. They knew which sections were most fragile, which supports needed reinforcing, and which devices could trigger further damage. Goran followed their directions precisely, carefully maneuvering heavy crystals into place. At one point, a large crystal panel began to tilt dangerously. Without hesitation, Goran grabbed it with both hands, holding it steady while the twins reinforced its supports. Their combined efforts prevented a disaster that could have collapsed part of the village. But the threat was not over. From the edges of the cliffs, Goran noticed movement. Figures appeared, scouts from the rival mining corporation. They were observing, likely planning to intervene once the sabotage succeeded. Goran's heart tightened. He knew confrontation was inevitable, but he also understood that brute force alone might not work. The twins chirped warnings, signaling weak points in the cliffs and hidden passages that could be used strategically. Goran nodded, formulating a plan. He would not fight recklessly. Instead, he would use the terrain, the twins' knowledge, and his own strength to protect the village. Step by step, he moved toward the next critical section of the core, carrying the twins on his shoulders, ready for any unexpected danger. The twins led him to a narrow tunnel that ran beneath the main energy core. It was dark, with loose rocks threatening to fall at any moment. Goran's height made the passage tight, but he crouched carefully, adjusting his steps. The twins chirped urgently, pointing to a section where the sabotage devices were planted. Goran examined it. The mechanism was delicate, almost invisible to the untrained eye. A wrong move could trigger an explosion. Goran took a deep breath and began the work. He stabilized the section with his hands, while the twins moved in, carefully disarming the devices. Sparks flew, and a faint hiss of overheated circuits filled the air. Sweat dripped down Goran's face, but he remained focused. His movements were slow and precise, guided by both his own skill and the twins' instructions. As he worked, Goran reflected on the nature of courage. It was not about size or strength alone. It was about acting when others could not, protecting those who could not protect themselves, and using intelligence to solve impossible problems. The twins embodied this courage despite their small size, and he realized that his strength was most effective when combined with their knowledge and bravery. Finally, the sabotage devices were neutralized. Goran exhaled in relief, and the twins chirped excitedly, their skin glowing in soft shades of green and blue. The energy core began to stabilize, the hum of the crystals returning to a steady rhythm. But the danger was not over. The tremors continued, and the cliffside was unstable. The scouts from the rival corporation were still observing, waiting for a moment to strike. Goran knew they had to move quickly. He instructed the twins to help guide the villagers to safer sections of the cliffside. The tiny Lyrians scurried to each home, directing their neighbors, reinforcing supports, and calming frightened children. Goran followed, carrying heavy debris and shielding the tiny beings from falling rocks. Together, human and alien worked as a team, turning a dangerous situation into a coordinated effort. As the day progressed, the cliffside tremors grew stronger. A section of rock above the village began to crack, threatening to collapse onto the homes below. Goran assessed the situation quickly. He could use his strength to support the rock while the twins reinforced the energy core and the village structures. It was risky but necessary. He positioned himself under the overhanging rock, bracing it with his massive shoulders. The twins darted along the edges, adding supports and signaling when sections were secure. Villagers watched in awe, their fear turning into hope. The sight of a human and tiny aliens working together, each respecting the strengths of the other, was inspiring. Hours later, as the sun began to set, the energy core was fully stabilized. The village was safe, at least for the moment. Goran stepped back, exhausted but satisfied. The twins chirped joyfully, their colors shifting to vibrant shades of green and gold. They danced around him, showing their gratitude in the only way their species knew. Goran smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. But there was still work to do. The rival corporation's scouts were not yet gone, and the sabotage had not been traced to its source. Goran knew this was only the beginning. Whoever had tried to destroy the village would likely return, and he had to be ready. As night fell, Goran and the twins rested in a safe area of the cliffside. The stars of Varian 5 glittered above, reflected in the glowing crystals of the village. The twins snuggled close, their small bodies trusting him completely. Goran looked at them, feeling a protective warmth. He realized that this mission was more than just saving a village. It was about forging bonds across differences in size and species, about showing that courage and intelligence could overcome any challenge. Goran's mind wandered as he considered the future. The sabotage was deliberate, and whoever was behind it had knowledge of the Lyrians' technology. The threat was real, and he could not ignore it, but he also knew that together they were stronger. The twins had courage, knowledge, and heart, and he had strength, skill, and determination. Combined, they could face any danger. The night was quiet, with only the hum of the energy crystals and the distant sounds of the canyon wind. Goran sat watching over the village, the twins perched on his shoulders, and felt a sense of purpose he had never known. This was why he had come to Varian 5, not just to survive, but to make a difference. And as the stars shone above, he knew that the true challenge was yet to come. Tomorrow, they would uncover more about the sabotage, face the rival humans, and protect the tiny village from further danger. But for now, Goran allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. The giant human and the tiny alien twins had faced the first test together, and they had passed. The bond they had formed would carry them through the trials ahead, and no one, not even the forces seeking to destroy the village, could underestimate the power of courage, intelligence, and teamwork. And so, as the night deepened and the cliffs of Varian 5 settled into a fragile calm, Goran, the giant human, watched over the tiny twins and their village. The journey was far from over, but he felt ready. Together, they would face whatever came next, and the story of their bravery would spread across the planet, inspiring humans and Lyrians alike. The morning dawned pale and quiet over Varian 5, but Goran sensed tension in the air. The village lay nestled on the cliffside, glimmering softly as the crystals caught the first light. Despite the repairs of the previous day, Goran knew the sabotage was not finished. Whoever had tampered with the energy core had knowledge, skill, and a clear purpose. The scouts from the rival mining corporation were still out there, observing, waiting for the right moment to strike. The tiny twins perched on Goran's shoulders, chirping softly. Their colors flickered nervously, pale blues and faint purples, signaling their concern. They were aware of the threat more acutely than Goran realized. Small and agile, they had noticed movements that even his giant eyes could barely follow. Their chirps and gestures guided him as he prepared for another day of intense work. Goran's plan for the day was careful. First, they would reinforce the village's most vulnerable sections. Next, they would uncover the origin of the sabotage devices. And finally, if possible, they would prevent any further attack before it could reach critical levels. He knew this required strategy, not brute force alone. Strength would help, but intelligence and cooperation would decide the outcome. The twins led him to a section of the cliff that overlooked the canyon floor. From there, they indicated small pathways used by the scouts. Goran crouched, lowering himself to avoid being seen, while the twins scurried ahead to gather information. They returned quickly, chirping excitedly and flashing colors that indicated hidden sensors and traps planted to delay human intervention. The rival corporation clearly expected Goran to act recklessly, underestimating both his strength and his mind. Goran smiled slightly. They were about to learn that humans could be patient, clever, and precise all at once. He began by reinforcing the energy conduits that fed the village's homes. Using his massive hands, he carefully replaced broken crystal panels and added supports to prevent further collapse. The twins moved along the edges, placing delicate stabilizers in hard-to-reach spots, adjusting each one with meticulous care. As they worked, the tremors grew stronger. The cliffs themselves seemed to protest the stress of construction and natural instability. Goran realized the sabotage was not just mechanical but also structural. The attackers had weakened the cliff itself, creating a potential catastrophe beyond the energy core. "We need to stabilize the base," he said to the twins, pointing to a large section of exposed rock. They chirped in agreement, their colors flashing bright green. They guided him to hidden pockets of strong crystal within the cliffside. With his strength, Goran lifted massive sections into place, bracing them with temporary supports while the twins worked with smaller reinforcements. Hours passed. The twins' energy never waned, and Goran adapted to their pace, moving carefully and strategically. The villagers watched from safe distances, inspired by the sight of a human coordinating so seamlessly with beings far smaller than himself. Children peered curiously, elders nodded with approval, and even the more skeptical adults could not help but be impressed by Goran's skill and patience. Once the immediate structural threats were addressed, Goran turned his attention to the sabotage devices themselves. They were hidden cleverly within the energy conduits, designed to appear as normal components. The twins identified the most dangerous units, chirping rapidly to alert him. Goran examined them carefully. These devices were intricate, more so than anything he had seen on the planet. Whoever created them clearly had intelligence and experience. He needed a plan. Using a combination of careful movement, observation, and the twins' guidance, he approached the first device. The tiny aliens directed him to hold certain sections steady while they adjusted delicate components. Sparks flew, and faint hissing sounds filled the air, but step by step, they neutralized the first device. The twins chirped in excitement, signaling that it was safe. Goran moved to the next device, repeating the careful process. By now, the villagers were watching closely, learning from the twins' movements and Goran's methods. This was not just a repair operation. It was a lesson in courage, cooperation, and ingenuity. Even the scouts from the rival corporation, hidden in the canyon below, paused in disbelief. They had expected chaos and failure, yet they saw a single human working with tiny aliens to methodically dismantle threats that should have been insurmountable. But the challenge grew. The final sabotage device was located deep within the energy core chamber, a narrow area surrounded by delicate crystal conduits. Goran had to squeeze through, his large frame carefully avoiding contact with the fragile structures. The twins scurried ahead, pointing out weak spots and signaling safe paths. Their small size and agility were crucial. Without them, Goran could not have reached the device safely. As he reached the device, a sudden tremor shook the chamber violently. Crystals shifted and debris fell from above. Goran braced himself, using his body to shield the twins who had followed him closely. Sparks flew from the device as it destabilized. One wrong move could trigger an explosion. His heart pounded, but his mind was steady. He adjusted his grip, following the twins' precise instructions and slowly neutralized the device. A hiss of relief escaped as the mechanism shut down safely. The twins chirped in triumph, their colors bright and vivid. Goran smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. They had done it, they had prevented disaster, and the village was now safe from immediate sabotage. But the danger was far from over. The scouts below were still a threat, and the person or group behind the sabotage remained unknown. Goran decided it was time to confront the scouts indirectly. He used the cliff's natural terrain to his advantage, moving to a vantage point where he could observe without being seen. The twins scouted ahead, identifying the positions of the hidden humans. Goran realized that they were not just waiting to attack. They were trying to learn, to study his methods and the village's defenses. He needed to act carefully. He devised a plan that relied on strategy rather than brute force. Using the twins' knowledge of hidden paths and his own understanding of physics, he set small traps and diversions to guide the scouts away from the village. Rocks shifted, dust clouds created barriers, and carefully placed supports channeled their movement without direct confrontation. The twins chirped instructions, their small voices guiding him with precision. The scouts were confused and frustrated. They expected an easy target, a chaotic situation they could exploit. Instead, they encountered a human who was clever, patient, and strategic, aided by tiny beings who moved like shadows. One by one, the scouts retreated, realizing that attacking now would be futile. Goran's combination of strength, intelligence, and teamwork had turned the tables. With the immediate threat removed, Goran returned to the village. The twins guided him through safe paths, checking each home and crystal conduit to ensure stability. Villagers emerged cautiously, expressing relief and gratitude. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a human, working in perfect coordination with tiny aliens, saving their homes and lives with a mix of courage and intelligence that they had never seen before. Goran sat with the twins on a ledge overlooking the village. "We did it," he said quietly. "For now, the village is safe." The twins chirped softly, their skin glowing in gentle shades of green. They were exhausted but proud, and Goran felt the same. He realized that this day had been more than just repairs and defense. It had been a lesson in trust, courage, and the power of cooperation across species. As evening fell, Goran looked at the cliffs and the shimmering village below. He knew that the sabotage was only part of a larger plan. Whoever had tried to destroy the village had the knowledge, the means, and likely the motive to strike again. But he also knew something else. Humans could be more than expected. They could combine strength with intelligence, courage with patience, and work alongside even the smallest beings to achieve the impossible. The tiny twins nestled against him, chirping softly as the village lights glowed in the darkening canyon. Goran felt a protective warmth. They had trusted him, and he had honored that trust. He realized that his role was no longer just a giant human wandering the cliffs. He was a guardian, a strategist, and a symbol of hope for a tiny village on a dangerous world. As the night deepened, Goran thought about the future. The sabotage might have been prevented, but the rival corporation's intentions were not yet revealed. He would need to prepare, to learn, and to continue working with the twins to protect the village and uncover the larger threat. But for now, there was a sense of calm, a fragile peace that had been won through courage, cooperation, and determination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and the real mastermind behind the sabotage would likely reveal themselves. But Goran was ready. Together with the tiny twins, he had proven that no obstacle was too great, no danger too severe, and no enemy too clever when human courage, intelligence, and teamwork were combined with the insight and bravery of even the smallest allies. And so, as the stars of Varian 5 sparkled above and the cliffs settled into quiet, Goran and the twins rested. The village was safe for the night, and a story of heroism and cooperation had already begun to spread among the villagers. It was a story that would inspire them for generations, a story of a giant human who had faced danger with a tiny team of aliens and against all odds prevailed. The real challenge was still ahead, but Goran now understood something profound. Strength alone was not enough. True power came from courage, intelligence, compassion, and the willingness to act for others. He had discovered this truth through the trust and bravery of the tiny twins, and he knew that together they could face whatever lay ahead, no matter how impossible it seemed. The next morning, a faint mist hung over the cliffs of Varian 5, casting a soft glow on the village. Goran had spent the night surveying the area, making small adjustments to the repaired sections, and observing from a distance. The tiny twins chirped softly on his shoulders, alert and energetic despite the long day before. Their colors shifted constantly, shades of green and blue, showing focus and curiosity. They were ready to continue the work, to ensure the safety of their home and to face whatever new challenges awaited. Goran knew that the sabotage was only part of a larger plan. Whoever had attempted to destroy the village had intelligence and resources. It was clear that the rival mining corporation's goal was not merely theft, but control. The village's energy crystals were rare, valuable, and capable of powering machinery far beyond the Lyrians' modest needs. Controlling the source meant controlling the surrounding region, and the corporation would stop at nothing to achieve it. The twins led Goran toward the outskirts of the village, where small structures had been left untouched. These homes were older, built closer to the cliff's edge. The twins chirped rapidly, pointing to tiny disturbances in the dust and crystal fragments. Goran followed their guidance, noticing small tracks that indicated the presence of intruders. It seemed the sabotage had been more than an attack, it was reconnaissance. The rival humans had been studying the village carefully, and their next move was imminent. Goran crouched low, scanning the area. The twins' chirps became urgent. They had identified a hidden path leading toward the village's central energy crystal, a narrow channel of rock that could be used to infiltrate the core. Goran's eyes narrowed. This was the real danger. If the corporation managed to reach the central crystal, the entire village could be destroyed. He would have to act quickly, using strategy, strength, and the twins' knowledge. He devised a plan. First, they would reinforce the central area with temporary supports that could hold under pressure. Next, they would set up small diversions to mislead any intruders. Finally, they would be ready to confront the infiltrators directly, combining human strength with the twins, agility, and intelligence. It was a plan that required precision and trust, but Goran had learned long ago that careful preparation often turned the tide in impossible situations. The twins scurried ahead, placing delicate supports and checking hidden sections. Goran followed, moving massive crystal panels into place to shield the approach to the energy core. Sweat dripped down his face, and his muscles burned, but he did not pause. Every motion was careful, every step calculated. The twins guided him, pointing out weaknesses in the rock and signaling safe paths. Their tiny voices and gestures carried a clarity that transcended their size. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the canyon. Goran's heart tightened. A section of the cliffside had shifted, larger than any tremor he had felt before. Rocks tumbled downward, sending clouds of dust into the air. The twins chirped urgently, their colors flashing purple and blue. Goran acted immediately, bracing the loose rocks with his massive arms while the twins moved to reinforce the supports. Step by step, they stabilized the area, preventing disaster. As the dust settled, Goran noticed movement in the distance. Figures were approaching, climbing the canyon walls with careful precision, scouts from the rival corporation. But this time they were not hiding, they were advancing openly, clearly intending to strike. Goran adjusted his stance. He knew confrontation was unavoidable. He would need to protect the village and its energy core at all costs. The twins chirped rapidly, directing him to hidden positions that offered both cover and strategic advantage. Goran crouched behind a large crystal panel, peering out. The intruders were armed with tools designed to manipulate the energy crystals, not weapons. Their plan was to destabilize the core remotely, without direct combat. Goran's mind raced. He could not allow them to succeed, but brute force alone would not work against such precise devices. He decided to act with both strength and cunning. Using his size, he created diversions, moving large panels of crystal and stone to block paths and redirect the intruders. The twins scurried along, adjusting small devices and signals to mislead the attackers. One by one, the scouts found their path blocked, their devices failing to operate as intended. They exchanged confused signals among themselves, realizing that the village was not as defenseless as they had assumed. Goran's strategy was working. The twins moved quickly, disabling small sabotage devices along the way, while Goran used his strength to manipulate the terrain. The intruders were frustrated, their plan unraveling before their eyes. They tried to advance further, but Goran anticipated their moves, positioning himself to block critical paths. The twins' quick thinking allowed them to guide him through narrow passages, maximizing his effectiveness despite his size. Hours passed in tense, careful maneuvering. The canyon echoed with the hum of energy crystals and the soft chirps of the twins. The intruders were clever, but Goran and the twins were more resourceful. The villagers watched from safe areas, inspired by the teamwork unfolding before them. Children clutched each other, elders whispered encouragement, and the community realized that strength was not only in size but in intelligence and cooperation. Finally, the last intruder reached the central energy core. Goran's eyes narrowed. This was the critical moment. If the device succeeded, the village would collapse. He moved swiftly, using his massive hands to shield the core while the twins guided him to vulnerable points. Sparks flew as he manipulated the crystal panels, carefully adjusting them to prevent overload. The intruder tried to intervene, but Goran's size and position made it impossible for them to reach the core directly. The twins darted along the edges, disabling small devices and signaling Goran where to apply pressure. Step by step, they neutralized the threat. The intruders' devices failed, and they stumbled back in disbelief. Goran's combination of human strength, patience, and strategic thinking had turned the tide. The rival corporation's plan was foiled, and the village remained safe. The intruder retreated, signaling others to fall back. Goran did not chase them. He knew the real threat was not the scouts, they were expendable. The mastermind behind the sabotage remained hidden, and their plan was likely far more dangerous. For now, the village was safe, but he could not afford to be complacent. Goran turned to the twins, who chirped excitedly, their colors bright and joyful. "We did it," he said, smiling. "For now, the village is safe. But we need to be ready for what comes next." The twins responded with a soft chorus of chirps, signaling their agreement and determination. The villagers emerged slowly, expressing gratitude and relief. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a giant human and tiny aliens working together, combining strength, intelligence, and courage to protect their home. The story of this cooperation would spread throughout the village, inspiring hope and unity. As evening fell, Goran and the twins took stock of their surroundings. The cliffs were stable for the moment, and the energy core hummed steadily. But Goran's mind was on the future. The mastermind behind the sabotage had not revealed themselves. Whoever it was, they had knowledge, resources, and a plan. The next move would be more dangerous, and preparation would be crucial. Goran devised a plan for the following day. They would strengthen the village further, identify potential hidden pathways, and set up early warning systems using the Lyrian's crystal technology. The twins chirped excitedly, suggesting adjustments and improvements based on their knowledge of the village. Goran listened carefully, respecting their expertise and incorporating their ideas into the strategy. Night fell, and the village settled into a quiet calm. Goran sat on a ledge, the twins perched on his shoulders, watching the stars of Varian 5 sparkle above. He reflected on the events of the day. Courage had been tested, intelligence had been applied, and teamwork had triumphed. The tiny twins had proved that even the smallest beings could have immense impact, and he had learned that human strength was most effective when paired with careful planning and cooperation. Yet he remained vigilant. The sabotage had been deliberate, and the rivals had not yet been fully defeated. The village's safety depended on preparation, quick thinking, and the continued partnership between human and Lyrians. Goran's mind raced with possibilities, anticipating challenges and solutions, ensuring that the village would survive whatever came next. As he settled in for the night, Goran felt a quiet sense of pride. He had not only protected the village but also inspired it. The tiny Lyrians had seen that courage, intelligence, and cooperation could overcome even the most dangerous threats. They had learned to trust him completely, and he had learned to trust them in return. The real test was still ahead. The mastermind behind the sabotage would not give up easily, and their plan would likely escalate. Goran knew that he and the twins would need to be stronger, faster, and smarter than ever before. But he was ready. Together, they had already faced seemingly impossible odds and had emerged victorious. And so, under the shimmering light of Varian 5 stars, Goran, the giant human, watched over the village with the tiny twins at his side. The cliffside settlement was safe for the night, but the adventure was far from over. The lessons learned, the bonds formed, and the courage displayed would carry them through the challenges ahead. The mastermind behind the sabotage would reveal themselves soon, and when they did, they would face not only a human of great strength, but also tiny allies whose courage and intelligence matched the mightiest of foes. The journey was far from complete, but Goran knew one thing with certainty. No matter the size, no matter the threat, teamwork, courage, and intelligence could overcome any obstacle. And together, the giant human and the tiny alien twins would face whatever came next, ready to protect their home and ensure the survival of the village they had come to love. The morning light spread slowly over Varian 5, casting the cliffs and the village in a soft, golden glow. Goran had already been awake for hours, walking along the cliffside, inspecting the energy crystals and the reinforced structures. The tiny twins scurried ahead, chirping urgently, their skin glowing in bright, alert shades of green and blue. Today felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sense of anticipation. Goran knew the final test was coming. The sabotage had been part of a larger scheme, and now it was clear to him. The mastermind behind the attacks would reveal themselves. Whoever they were, they had knowledge, cunning, and patience. They had watched Goran's every move, learning his methods and testing the village's defenses. Goran's mind raced, considering possible strategies, preparing for confrontation while ensuring the villagers remained safe. The twins led him to a high vantage point overlooking the village. From there, Goran could see a movement in the distant canyon, a figure, larger and more deliberate than any scout they had encountered. The figure moved with purpose, and unlike the previous intruders, there was no hesitation. Goran's instincts told him this was the mastermind. He crouched, watching carefully. The figure approached the cliffside, carrying tools designed to manipulate the energy crystals. Goran realized that the intruder's plan was to destabilize the central crystal, the heart of the village's energy system. If successful, the village could collapse entirely. The twins chirped urgently, pointing out hidden paths and weak points in the cliffside. Goran listened carefully, formulating a plan. He would need to act swiftly, combining his strength, the twins' knowledge, and clever strategy. The intruder was clearly powerful, but they had underestimated one thing: the bond between Goran and the twins, and the human capacity to adapt to challenges no matter the size or skill of the enemy. Goran moved silently along the ledges, using the terrain to conceal his approach. The twins scurried ahead, checking the paths and signaling any hidden dangers. The intruder continued toward the central crystal, oblivious to the human who was now closing in. Goran felt a surge of determination. Today, he would protect the village once and for all. As he approached the intruder, Goran observed the tools being prepared. They were devices capable of overloading the energy core, but the design had one flaw: they required precise placement and timing. Goran recognized an opportunity. He could use his strength and speed to disrupt the intruder before they could complete their plan. The twins chirped urgently, signaling that the central path was clear. Goran leaped forward, his massive hands gripping the rocky terrain as he descended toward the intruder. The figure looked up, startled, but it was too late. Goran moved with calculated force, intercepting the intruder and shielding the central crystal with his own body. The tools clattered to the ground, rendered useless by the sudden intervention. The intruder tried to recover, but Goran's size and precision left no room for maneuver. The twins darted around, securing the area and reinforcing supports that had been threatened by the intruder's devices. Goran spoke firmly, his voice carrying authority and calm determination. "Step back, this ends now." The intruder paused, assessing the human and the tiny aliens. They were clever and resourceful, and their coordination had prevented disaster. For the first time, the intruder hesitated. Goran could see the realization in their eyes. The village would not fall so easily, and the human before them was more than just strong. He was determined, intelligent, and courageous. Goran advanced carefully, keeping the intruder away from the central crystal. The twins chirped, signaling where weak points could be used to guide the intruder safely away without causing harm. Goran had no desire for unnecessary violence. His goal was protection, not destruction. Step by step, he maneuvered the intruder toward a safe path out of the village. The intruder resisted initially, but Goran's presence was commanding, his movements precise. The twins' guidance ensured that no critical structures were damaged. Finally, the intruder stumbled, losing balance, and retreated down a narrow path away from the village. Goran watched until they disappeared completely, ensuring that the threat was truly gone. The twins chirped joyfully, their skin glowing in vibrant green and gold. Goran exhaled, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. The village was safe, the energy core secure, and the intruder neutralized without unnecessary harm. It had been a test of strength, intelligence, and cooperation, and together they had passed. The villagers emerged cautiously, their eyes wide with amazement. Children ran toward Goran, chirping and squealing with excitement. Elders nodded in respect, whispering about the courage and wisdom displayed by the human who had saved their homes. Even those who had doubted humans were now convinced. Size alone did not define strength, and courage and intelligence could triumph against the most dangerous threats. Goran knelt, allowing the tiny twins to perch on his shoulders once again. "We did it," he said softly. The twins chirped in response, their colors shifting to calm, soothing shades. They had been fearless, intelligent, and resourceful throughout the ordeal, and Goran felt a deep connection to them. Their trust had been rewarded, and their bravery had saved lives. He turned to the village, observing the repairs that had been completed, the supports reinforced, and the energy core stabilized. Every detail mattered. The villagers had learned from the twins and from Goran's example. They had seen that courage, intelligence, and teamwork could overcome obstacles that seemed impossible. As the sun began to set, painting the cliffs in shades of gold and orange, Goran reflected on the journey. The sabotage, the scouts, and the mastermind had tested him in ways he had never imagined. But he had also discovered the power of cooperation, the value of trust, and the importance of courage, not just his own, but that of even the smallest allies. The twins chirped softly, nudging Goran toward the village center. They wanted to check the energy core one last time. Goran moved with care, following their guidance as they inspected each section. The core hummed steadily, glowing with a soft, reassuring light. Everything was in place. The village's safety was no longer fragile, it was secure. Goran looked at the twins, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. They had faced danger together, relied on each other, and succeeded. He realized that size, species, or strength were secondary to courage, intelligence, and determination. These tiny beings had as much heart as any giant human, and together they had protected a community against overwhelming odds. The villagers gathered around, expressing gratitude in their own ways, chirps, gestures, and smiles. Children brought small crystals as gifts, elders offered words of encouragement, and even those who had been fearful now nodded with respect. Goran felt a deep warmth in his chest. He had not only protected the village, but had also inspired it. As night fell, Goran sat on a ledge overlooking the village, the twins perched on his shoulders, their colors glowing softly in the dark. The stars of Varian 5 twinkled above, reflected in the crystals below. He thought about the challenges they had faced, the sabotage, the scouts, and the final confrontation with the mastermind. Each test had been difficult, but each had been met with courage, intelligence, and cooperation. The twins chirped softly, their bodies glowing in shades of calm blue. They were exhausted but happy, and Goran felt the same. He realized that their journey was more than survival. It was about learning, growing, and forming bonds that transcended size and species. Together they had achieved the impossible, and they had done so with respect, care, and bravery. Goran knew that future challenges might arise. Other threats could come, and the rival corporation might attempt new schemes. But he also knew something vital. The village was not alone, and neither were the twins. With courage, intelligence, and teamwork, they could face anything. And Goran himself had learned that true heroism was not measured by size or power, but by the willingness to act, to protect, and to inspire those around you. The twins chirped one last time, signaling contentment and trust. Goran smiled, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had become more than just a protector. He was a friend, a guide, and a symbol of hope for the tiny aliens he had come to care for deeply. As the night deepened, the village of Varian 5 lay peacefully on its cliffside, illuminated by the steady glow of the energy crystals. The sabotage had been stopped, the intruders repelled, and the mastermind thwarted. But more importantly, bonds had been formed between species, and courage had been proven to transcend size. Goran leaned back, the twins snuggled close and gazed at the stars. The adventure had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately transformed him. He had discovered that intelligence, courage, and compassion were the greatest strengths a being could possess. And he knew that, together with the tiny alien twins, they had the power to protect their home and face any future challenges. The cliffs were quiet now, the village safe, and the night filled with a sense of peace and hope. Goran's heart swelled with pride, not just for himself, but for the tiny twins and the villagers. Together they had faced danger, worked as a team, and emerged victorious. And so, under the endless stars of Varian 5, the giant human and the tiny alien twins watched over the village, ready to face the future, knowing that courage, intelligence, and teamwork would always prevail. The story of their bravery would be remembered by the villagers for generations, a testament to the power of cooperation, the importance of courage, and the incredible bond between the largest of humans and the smallest of aliens. For Goran and the twins, this was just the beginning. Their friendship, their trust, and their courage had created a foundation stronger than any crystal, and together they were unstoppable.